big leaders are in town today, and that is going to be the theme of our debate for the next hour or so. It gives me great pleasure to welcome onto the stage Sviatlana, who is CNBC's TV reporter specializing in European politics. Sylvia, it's great to have you here in the sanctuary. Come on up. A round of applause, please, for Sylvia and her panelists. A round of applause, please, for Sylvia and her panelists. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Nice to see you. How are you?
Nice to see you.
Hi,
Yeah,
welcome.
good.
Take a seat. Hello. Hello, welcome. Take a seat. Nice to see you. If everyone could take a seat nice and quickly, please, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you can all hear us well. In this panel, we're going to be discussing Russia's war in Ukraine. And I just wanted to share this stat with you because it does paint a picture. According to US data, the total number of Ukrainians and Russian troops killed or wounded as of August was around 500,000 people. And of course, this war just seems to be intensifying at this stage. We see war fatigue increasing as well. And let's not forget that Ukraine is also struggling to get financial aid. So to discuss some of these topics, I'm very pleased to introduce to you my all-female panel. We have with us Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya. She is the Belarusian opposition leader. It's a pleasure to see you again in Davos. And we also have with us Beata Javorcik. She is the chief economist at the EBRD. Thank you both for your time today. I would like to start this conversation by asking you, Beata, to just paint a picture for us, because the EBRD is heavily invested in Ukraine. You have a specific team dedicated to Ukraine as well. What are they telling you about the biggest challenges for Ukraine at this stage?
So we are back in the country on the ground, and the team indeed is reporting that the situation is very challenging. You may recall that last winter, about 50% of energy infrastructure was destroyed. That means that Ukraine entered this winter with much more vulnerable infrastructure, though the country got better at emergency fixes. I think the biggest challenge is securing flows of financing from outside. And I think the Ukrainian authorities are understanding that they cannot rely only on external financing, that it is important to get the economy going to the extent possible, bring the people back, and rebuild the revenue base.
It is a challenging picture when you think about how Ukraine is fighting this war at this stage. And actually, I would like to follow up by asking you, Sviatlana, about the lack of support from the EU and the US at this stage. A lot of conversations on coming up with financial aid for Ukraine at this stage, but we're seeing lawmakers struggling on both sides of the Atlantic to approve this support. Do you think that both the US and Europe are failing in their support for Ukraine?
Maybe we can admit that the support is failing, but we still have opportunity to win the war in Ukraine. I'm so grateful that Ukrainians are, or I'm so sure that Ukrainians are grateful for economic support to the nation who are struggling with tyranny. But what is more important, or not less important, is political support, diplomatic support, support of ordinary people. And I think that democratic world have returned to values-based policy rather than interest-based policy. You know how support to Ukraine and Belarus actually look like at the moment. One hand is supporting Ukrainian people, other hand is continuing to trade with country aggressor. And the same about Belarus. We asking to punish dictators, punish the regimes who are humiliating their own people, their own nations, and killing other people. Just impose as tough sanctions as possible. But we see how loopholes that exist. They can't make all the sanctions efforts effective. The same when Ukrainians and Belarusians here, and it is spread by intensifying with Russian propaganda that, oh, there is fatigue in the world, everybody is tired of the war in Ukraine. Do you think these messages and narratives help Ukrainians and Belarusians to continue this fight? You know, it's so frustrated when you feel that you are going to be abandoned, you are going to be forgotten, you know, that your war is considered to be your war, not our common war. It's really like deprive people of energy to continue the fight. So positive messages that you are important. We are going to help you, you know, whatever and whatever it takes, you know, us, and just it's inspire people to continue this fight. So that's why, you know, it's so important to be, you know, the solidarity, to be with people, not only, of course, in the wars, but with the actions, because it's people who are fighting. And democratic world is only helping these people to win, because the fight with tyranny is not the local one. It's not about Ukraine only or Belarus only. It's our global one, and it's responsibility of every country, you know, to fight this dictatorship. We see how dictators are, you know, they are like start to collaborate together. They are making coalition to fight with democratic world. And what's the answer of democratic world? We are getting tired.
We have heard, though, a couple of comments on further political support for Ukraine. I would just highlight how the EU has said, yes, we're ready to start accession talks with Ukraine. But is that enough when the troops on the ground, what they need is more military equipment? It's like, what is the most important support for Ukraine at this stage? Is it the cash, the weapons, or the political message?
Everything is important. You know, politicians will not assist enough to Ukraine if people of this or that country will not support this idea. And, you know, we really have to counter propaganda, because I see how Russian propaganda is like cancer. They are poisoning people with thought that, why do you have to suffer for Ukraine? It's their war, it's not yours. So stop your government from supporting Ukraine. But it's not Ukrainian war, as I said before, it's our common war. And one day, you know, many countries can wake up and see that the enemy is already at their doors. What you are going to do then? So military support is crucial. Of course, you know, people need, you know, weapon to fight. But political support and positive messages are not less important to support spirit of people.
It's everything. Beata, I would like to turn a little bit more into the economics of the situation right now in Ukraine. Somehow, Ukraine is projected, according to the EBRD, to grow about 3% this year. Where is that growth coming from, and how can the Ukrainians boost it?
Well, so let me put it into perspective for you. In 2022, the Ukrainian economy shrunk by about a third. This year, we see some positive developments, growth of about 5%, but of course, this is a growth from a much lower base. To the credit of the authorities, they have done an incredible job keeping macroeconomic stability. So inflation is in low single digit, exchange rate has stabilized. So there are positive things happening. And, you know, the message on financing is not always very bleak. For instance, our shareholders at the EBRD have agreed to a capital increase for us so that we can support Ukraine through the war and during the reconstruction. And last year, we deployed more than 2 billion euros to Ukraine. 1 billion was directed towards private sector. So this is helping expand industrial park near Lviv. It goes to agri-producers so that Ukraine can export more grain. It helps companies in manufacturing sector expand their production. And I think it is very important to focus on the economy now, on supporting the private sector. on making it easier for people to go back. Because all this discussion about reconstruction focuses on money, on physical capital, but what you need is human capital, people. You want, the more people come back, the better positioned Ukraine will be when the time for reconstruction comes.
What is the most pressing financial need for Ukraine? Where should they be focusing the investments at this stage? Because it's perhaps a little bit too early to think about reconstruction, right? So as they hopefully get further funding from the US, EU, whatever that is, where should they be focusing these investments?
Well, I think there are two types of needs. The first need is military spending, right? As Louis XIV, the King of France, said, the last guinea always wins. So the economy that has more resources is better placed to win a war. And then the second area is budget support. My understanding is that, the revenues in Ukraine help the government keep the military effort going at some stable level. But you need to pay public servants, you need to pay teachers. So the government needs to balance its books. And it was able to do that thanks to inflows of money, of help from outside. And therefore, continued flow of money is crucial. Because the last thing you want is Ukraine spiraling into a macroeconomic crisis. The country needs to win not only the war, but also peace. It needs macroeconomic stability to continue functioning, to continue fighting, and to be better positioned for the reconstruction.
It's a challenging task, however. Sviatlana, I would like to ask you to share a little bit of the stories that you hear from Belarus, because more often than not, I feel that we don't pay enough attention to the role of Belarus in Russia's invasion of Ukraine. What are people within Belarus telling you at this stage?
So I just want to remind you that in Belarus it's rather non-conventional situation, because we have regime that is supporting the war in Ukraine, that is like allied to Putin, and Belarusian people who are fighting against this regime since 2020 and supporting Ukraine as much as we can since the beginning of the war. Just remember our partisan movement, disruption of railways, disruption of surveillance airplane, our military volunteers in Ukraine. We can't give a lot, we don't have like money or whatever, but with our solidarity, with small acts of heroism, we are supporting Ukraine as much as we can. So, and yes, my task is to explain to the democratic world how the fate of Belarus and fate of Ukraine are interconnected. Because very often I hear that, we have to help Ukraine, support Ukraine. Of course we should, it's our major task at the moment. But not forget about Belarus. Because if we leave Belarus as cancellation prize for Putin, if we abandon Belarusian people who are fighting with the regime, there will be constant security problems, for Ukrainians and for other countries. Only free, independent, and democratic and European Belarus will be responsible ally for all our neighbors. So when you talk about reconstruction plan, of course, I would like that Belarus and Moldova would be included in this reconstruction plan, because after Lukashenko, our country is fully destroyed. Economically, we have process of Russification. We also will have to restore our country, our Belarus. We have wonderful hard-working, law-obedient people, but we are lack of good management. And after change of the sectoral regime, we will need reforms, we will need resources, we will need investments, and EBRD, can be very helpful at this moment. So in your plan, don't forget about region. Of course, focus should be on Ukraine. The cities are ruined, institutions are ruined. But, it's silent war in Belarus at the moment as well. And we'll have to restore the whole region. So all I'm asking at the moment, how to weaken the regime of Lukashenko and strengthen Belarusian people. Impose more sanctions on Lukashenko's regime, isolate regime politically, and bring Lukashenko and his cronies to accountability. And help Belarusian people who are fighting. We are not asking the world to fight instead of us. Help us to win this war. just assist us. And yeah, and I just want to pay more attention to accountability. That is very important for Ukraine as well. You know, in Belarus, regime committed a row of crimes against humanity. The number of political prisoners is increasing in Belarus every day. Tortures. We live like in Stalin's time in Belarus. Migration crisis, hijacking of airplane, abduction of Ukrainian children from occupied territories to Belarus, and various punishment. You know, we have tons of data about these crimes, and we call international justice institution to launch special investigation on these crimes. No political will. Why? It means that international institutions don't work properly. You know, and this undecisiveness or lack of political will is perceived as weakness by dictators, and they cross red line after red line, just testing democratic world. What will be your answer? No answer, okay, we can go forward, we can go further.
And do you hear any sort of reports from people in Belarus complaining about this situation? Are people fed up about Russia's invasion of Ukraine and what that has also meant for people in Belarus?
Let's recall 2020 when people said very clearly that we are fed up with dictatorship. Millions of people were on the streets, and at that moment we were waiting for solidarity and support of the world. The first sanctions have been imposed in 6 or 7 months after our uprising, when already thousands of people were in prison. You know, of course, people are fed up with this creeping occupation of Belarus. They are fed up with the war in Ukraine, but the question is what people can do in this situation. You know, seeing brutality in our country and seeing no effective tools from a democratic world, you know, to punish the regime, to help people. Of course, people are frustrated. Of course, people went underground to work or to wait for moment of opportunity. You know, it can't work effectively. But when I hear from foreign politicians that, look, in Belarus, Belarusians are so silent, you know, no uprisings, you know, just maybe people got used to the situation and don't want to fight. No, people from Belarus, I'm communicating with people constantly. God bless internet, we have such possibilities. And they tell me, tell to our democratic allies that we are here, we are working, we are trying to weaken this regime from inside. While Lukashenko is still committing repressions every day. Every day in Belarus, 15, 20 people are being detained because he's afraid of people. He knows as only he stops repressions, people will be on the streets. And of course, people want to assist Ukraine as much as we can. You know that in Belarus, for donation to Ukrainian army, 20, 40 euros, people got 10, 15 years in jail for small donation. Recently, IT specialist who donated some money to Ukrainian army died in Belarusian prison. So this is the price Belarusian people also paying. Our military volunteers are also dying on the battlefields of Ukraine. But it's our small, but it's our contribution, you know, to Ukrainian victory.
Well, thanks for sharing that with us. Beata, I would like to look at reconstruction for a moment, and I know it feels very early to even think about it, but where should Ukraine start when is the time for reconstruction, and how expensive do you think this is going to be?
Well, when you look at 200 years of wars, at the history and the lessons you can draw from that is, you know, the first thing you see is that during the war, countries get indebted. On average, debt increases by about 50% of GDP. That happens because wars tend to be financed by external borrowing. There is massive destruction of infrastructure on the order of 2 years of GDP. And actually, in the case of Ukraine, the estimates that were done about a year ago were on the order of 400 billion. But what matters is not just money. I think the first challenge is finding a stable solution to the conflict. Because if you look at the history of conflicts between states, you see that in half of the cases, countries that emerged from an interstate war are below their GDP per capita trend, their pre-war trend, quarter of a century later. So in other words, 25 years later, countries are behind because of the war they were engaged in. And big chunk of that, big reason for that is because peace is elusive. Conflicts are followed by another conflict. And I think this is probably the biggest question, how to find a stable solution. Now, once you think about stable solution, you can think about money. Money explains only a small chunk of variation in how long it takes to rebuild the country. Think about Iraq, 220 billion pumped into the economy. Afghanistan, 120 billion, and not that much to show for.
Yeah.
So money is not enough. What's needed is peace, administrative capacity, and good institutions.
Now we're running out of time. I just would like to get one final thought from you, Sviatlana, because your life story is very similar to Ukraine. You're both fighting for democratic values. How can you continue this fight, and for how long do you think Ukraine can continue to fight this war as well?
I think that we will continue our Belarusian fight, and Ukrainians will continue their fight until victory. And it's a matter of solidarity and support from the democratic world, how fast we will manage to win. It may take just a couple of months, year, or it may take decades, to win. But people of our nations are full of determination to get rid of these imperialistic ambitions of Russia. We want to be part of European family of countries. We want to return to this family, we historically belong to. But we need support. And I want to repeat once again that it's not our war. I mean, Belarusians and Ukrainians, it's our common war. And I understand that the democratic world is enjoying democratic values, in your countries, but believe its democratic way of life is so fragile. And we have to protect not only your democracy in your countries, but also those who are fighting for this. And, I don't know how long it will take, but I hear from Belarusians and from Ukrainians that they're ready to sacrifice their lives, their freedom to bring our countries to democratic way of development. But again, it's responsibility of the whole world.
Thank you both for your time. I'm afraid we have to leave it there. I would just point out to our audience that we will hear from President Zelenskyy himself later on today on the main stage of the World Economic Forum. So an important address for all of us, hear what he has to say. Thank you, Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, Beata Javorcik, for your time. And thank you also to our audience for joining us here today.